It all started on a rainy Thursday. Ethan Blake walked briskly through the empty corridor of the liberal arts building, shoes clicking on the polished floor, damp from the unexpected downpour. His first month teaching had been turbulent. Students were fine, his lessons solid. But the department? Intimidating. Especially her. Dr. Valerie Moore. Her name carried weight in faculty meetings, in whispered student conversations, even in local academic circles. Ethan had only seen her twice. Once in the hallway, and once during orientation, where she said nothing but watched him for a few long seconds, a look that felt like being dissected. Today, however, they were scheduled to meet. Not formally, it was a simple departmental welcome reception in the lounge. But Ethan already knew this was more than that. She requested it. The door to the staff lounge was ajar. Laughter spilled from inside, soft jazz humming in the background. He took a breath and entered. The room went quieter, not silent, but enough that he noticed. Senior staff, wine glasses in hand, light bites on ceramic trays, and eyes that glanced at him, then moved on. He offered a polite smile and made his way to the corner where the assistant dean stood. And then she entered. Valerie Moore. Long dark coat. Tight black pencil skirt. Silk blouse deep burgundy. Heels that didn't make a sound. Her makeup subtle, lips dark. Her gaze lethal. She didn't greet the room. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked straight to the wine table, picked a glass, and without even turning, spoke. "You're Ethan Blake." It wasn't a question. Ethan swallowed and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Professor Blake." Valerie finally turned toward him. Her eyes sharp, amused, almost curious. "You look like someone who says ma'am even when he's not in trouble." He chuckled nervously. "Old habits." She sipped her wine. "Let's walk." Just like that, she turned, not looking back, assuming no, expecting that he'd follow. He did. They strolled down the hallway outside the lounge. Her heels still silent. Ethan felt like a student again, trailing behind a headmistress. He didn't know why she wasn't raising her voice, wasn't lecturing him. But there was a gravity to her presence. One he couldn't ignore. "You're ambitious," she said after a minute. "Too ambitious, maybe." He frowned slightly. "How so?" "I've seen your application. The interviews. Your work with students. You play the polite, respectful rookie, but you're not here to just teach, are you?" He hesitated. "Is that a bad thing?" She stopped walking. Slowly turned. Looked at him with that predator's calm. "Not at all. It's sexy." Ethan blinked. Did she really say? She leaned closer, lips near his ear. "But ambition without discipline is just noise. And I don't like noise." He opened his mouth, unsure what to say. But she was already walking again, her voice echoing softly. "I'll be watching you, Ethan. Closely." That night, Ethan barely slept. Her voice replayed in his head. The look in her eyes. The way she used words like sexy and discipline so deliberately. And yet it wasn't flirtation in the casual sense. No. It was dominance. Power. And somehow, he found himself drawn to it. He wasn't used to this. Sure, he'd had relationships. College flings. A 2-year thing that ended badly. But none had the same effect as a single look from Valerie Moore. 1 week later. Faculty lounge. Rain again. Ethan sat with a book. Hemingway. Just for show, mostly. He was waiting. Not that he'd admit it. Valerie arrived late as usual. But she wasn't alone. Another woman entered with her. Slim, blonde, confident stride. Short leather jacket over a form-hugging dress. Younger than Valerie, maybe early 30s. Definitely not faculty. Valerie caught his eye across the room. Held it. Then without breaking eye contact whispered something to the blonde. The woman turned to look at Ethan. Then smiled. A very, knowing smile. They sat together at a nearby table, their backs to the rest of the room, but angled so he could see them. Valerie crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. The blonde did the same. They sipped coffee. Whispered. Laughed softly. Every now and then, one of them would look at him. Not long. Just enough. He could feel it, the tension. The game. After 15 unbearable minutes, the blonde rose. Walked toward him, hips swaying with cruel precision. You must be Ethan, she said, voice playful. I'm Nina. Nice to meet you, he said, surprised. Oh, I know, she smiled. Valerie told me so much. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. About what? About how you blush when you're nervous. How your jaw tightens when you're trying to stay polite. And how you're curious. Very curious. He swallowed. I guess that's true. She leaned down, eyes at his level. Good. Curiosity gets rewarded. Come to her office tomorrow 7 p.m. Don't be late. And then she walked away. Back to Valerie. Who didn't even look at him again. Valerie's office 7:03 p.m. He knocked twice. Heard only the soft hum of music behind the door. Then it opened. The lights were dim. Candles flickered on the shelf. Valerie sat behind her desk, wearing a black silk blouse, top buttons undone, a long necklace resting between her breasts. No jacket. Ethan stepped in cautiously. She gestured to the chair across from her. You're late. 3 minutes. I didn't say how late. Only that you were. She stood up slowly, walked around a desk, and leaned on it, arms crossed. Staring at him. Do you know why I called you here? Ethan shrugged slightly. No. But I'm guessing it's not about curriculum planning. A smirk. Cute. She stepped closer. Not touching. Just standing close enough that he could smell her perfume, dark and elegant. I'm going to ask you something, Ethan. And I want an honest answer. Do you like control? He hesitated. Sometimes. Do you like giving it up? Silence. His throat went dry. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the heat under the ice. The desire tightly coiled under her composure. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Then it's time you learned." She reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a black silk tie, walked behind him, gently tied it around his eyes. His breath caught darkness. Then her fingers soft, careful on his shoulders. "You can leave at any moment. Say red and I stop." "Understood." He nodded. "Good boy." The scene didn't go further than light touches, her voice in his ear, her hand on his chest, brushing down to his waist, stopping just at the line of decency. But everything in between was charged, electric. Her lips never kissed him, but they hovered near his neck. Her breath warm, her words deliberate. She controlled everything. And when she finally untied him and sent him home with no release, no closure, Ethan walked out into the night utterly wrecked. And entirely hooked. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The scent of her perfume clung to his clothes, haunting. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shadows of her office, the candlelight flickering over dark silk. And her voice. "Good boy." Those two words echoed louder than any scream. He tried to distract himself with work. Read student essays. Replied to departmental emails. Even went for a run in the rain. But nothing silenced the pulse between his ribs. And worse, he didn't know what any of it meant. Was this some twisted hazing ritual? A test? A power game? Or something else? The next morning, he arrived early to his office. Half a cup of stale coffee sat on his desk as he stared blankly at the screen. That's when a knock came. He turned. Not Valerie. Nina. She stepped inside without invitation, tossing her coat onto the back of the guest chair and folding her arms. "You look like a man who didn't sleep." "I didn't." "Good." He raised an eyebrow. "You and Valerie, are you working together?" She smirked. "Define working." He leaned back, tired. "This some game you two like playing with new hires?" "Oh, honey," she laughed, "if it were a game, you'd have already lost." She walked over, pulled something from her coat pocket, and placed it on his desk. A black envelope. Sealed with red wax. "Read that alone. Tonight. Then decide what you want." He stared at it, then up at her. "Is this another mindfuck?" "No," she said, softer now. "It's an invitation." Then she left. That evening, he waited until the sun had dipped below the skyline before opening it. Inside, a single card. Heavy paper. Smooth to the touch. Friday 9 p.m. Room 3, Carrington House. Do not knock. Do not speak. Do not touch unless instructed. Black attire only. And bring nothing but your honesty. No signature. He stared at the note for a full 5 minutes. Then read it again. And again. Friday 9:01 p.m. Carrington House was an old faculty manor used for private events. Ethan had only seen it once during orientation. But tonight, the gates were open and the lights low. Room 3 was at the end of a long hallway. His shoes made almost no sound on the thick carpeting. No guards. No cameras. No one else. He placed his hand on the doorknob and pushed. It opened silently. The room was dim. One lamp glowed on a corner table, casting golden light over velvet chairs and wine-colored drapes. Valerie stood at the center of the room, back to him. Her hair in a long braid. She wore a sleek black corset, silk gloves, high heels. Dominant. Unapologetic. Nina sat in a nearby armchair, legs crossed, wearing a sheer black robe that barely covered anything. A glass of red wine in her hand. Watching. Waiting. Ethan swallowed hard. Valerie turned slowly, eyes scanning him head to toe. You followed directions. That's encouraging. Nina tilted her head. He looks nervous. Good, Valerie said. Nervous is honest. She walked toward him. Each step unhurried, predatory. When she reached him, she didn't touch. Just stood close enough that he could feel the heat from her body. You want to understand this, she said softly. But you don't need to. Not yet. He nodded. And you want to please me? Yes, he breathed. Say it again. I want to please you. A pause. She leaned in, her lips brushing the edge of his jawline. Then kneel. His legs moved before his brain caught up. He knelt on the plush carpet, eyes level with the shine of her heels. Valerie turned to Nina. He's quick. I like quick. Nina stood and walked over, circling him like a shark. Can I play? She asked. Valerie nodded. Gently. He's still new. Even better. Nina crouched in front of him, her fingers trailing along his jaw. You okay, sweet boy? He hesitated. I think so. That's not good enough, Valerie said sharply. He corrected himself. Yes. I'm okay. Good boy, Nina purred. Then she stood behind him, pulling a blindfold from the drawer. The world went dark. What followed was an hour of slow torment. Sensory play. Words. Touches. Not sexual in the explicit sense but charged. Nina whispered questions in one ear while Valerie dragged a single fingernail down his spine. They took turns circling him, challenging his breath, his posture, his discipline. When he flinched, Valerie whispered, control it. When he sighed, Nina teased, sensitive, aren't we? Every moment felt stretched and suspended in time. By the end, he was breathless, hard, humiliated and completely in awe. When the blindfold came off, Valerie knelt to meet his eyes. You're not broken, she said gently. You're being rebuilt. She kissed his cheek. That's enough for tonight. Go home. Saturday morning. Ethan stood under a cold shower longer than necessary. It wasn't just the night itself, it was the realization that he wanted more. Not just the physical elements, but the trust, the intensity, the structure. And he craved Valerie's voice. Her approval. He also couldn't deny his fascination with Nina. She was chaos in silk, unpredictable and playful, but precise. The two of them weren't just friends. There was a deep, layered history he hadn't even begun to understand. Later that day, in his inbox. From Dr. Valerie Moore. Subject, Reflection. What did you learn last night? What did you feel when you were told good boy? What scared you most? Do not answer with academic language. Answer like a man who feels. At the bottom. Deadline tonight. Midnight. No excuses. He replied. I felt seen. Not just watched, but understood. I was scared of not being enough. But when you said good boy, I didn't feel weak. I felt chosen. I want more. I want rules. I want to obey. And I want you to keep taking me apart. He hesitated before pressing send. But he did. That night, he dreamed of black silk and candlelight. Of hands he couldn't see. And voices that whispered in unison. Let go. We'll catch you. Monday morning. Office. The air felt different. Ethan walked through campus like a man whose skin didn't quite fit, hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper, every brush of wind across his collar. No one else knew, of course. No one knew what happened behind the closed doors of room 3. But he felt known. Owned. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and found another email. From Dr. Valerie Moore. Subject, Next Step. Room 2, Carrington House. Wednesday. 8 p.m. sharp. Come alone. You'll be given a choice. Be ready. He read it 3 times. Then closed his laptop and stared out the window. What did choice mean in her world? Wednesday. 8 p.m. Room 2, Carrington House. Ethan arrived 2 minutes early. The door was already ajar. Inside, dim light again, but warmer. Less performative. A fire crackled softly in the corner. 2 armchairs faced each other, low table in between. On it, a leather folder. Valerie stood by the window, silhouetted in a black pantsuit, no blouse beneath the blazer. Sharp. Clean. Deadly. Close the door, Ethan. He did. She turned, her expression unreadable. Sit. He obeyed. She walked to the table, opened the folder, and pulled out several pages. Handed them to him. He glanced down. It was a contract. Header, Mutual Consent Agreement, Psychological and Sensual Training. His breath caught. You don't need to sign, she said, settling into the other chair. But if you want to go further, if you want the structure, the rules, the reward, then this makes it real. He scanned the first page. It wasn't a joke. It outlined limits, safe words, behavioral expectations, punishments, phases. Nothing illegal, nothing that crossed true moral lines, but plenty that sent shivers through his spine. Emotional exposure. Physical submission. Complete transparency. And then there was a section labeled Shared Authority. This agreement involves both Dr. Valerie Moore and Ms. Nina Carter. The submissive acknowledges the influence and power of both. His mouth went dry. You both. Valerie's voice was calm. Nina and I work together. Sometimes. Not always. You're not entering a love triangle. You're stepping into a structured dynamic. We're the storm. You're the anchor. If you choose to be. He looked up. Why me? She tilted her head slightly. Because you bend without breaking. You blush without retreating. You want discipline, even if you don't know it yet. And you're smart enough to ask the right questions, eventually. He swallowed hard. If I sign this, what changes? Everything, she said. And nothing. He signed. That night didn't involve whips, cuffs, or blindfolds. It involved conversation. Hard questions. Deep questions. Valerie asked him about his exes, his fears, his body image, his father. Nina arrived later, curled up on the couch, listening. She asked bluntly. Have you ever been humiliated? Not embarrassed, humiliated. He paused. I don't think so. Would you like to be? She asked, grinning. Valerie cut in gently. That's a question for another day. But Ethan's answer was already forming. If it's with you too, maybe. Week 2. Training began. It started with small, strange tasks. Hold eye contact with Valerie for 3 straight minutes without blinking. Kneel for Nina in the middle of her reading poetry aloud. Write a fantasy and read it aloud without laughing, without flinching. You can't serve if you're still ashamed, Valerie said. Each task stripped a layer. Ethan didn't realize how many masks he'd been wearing until they started coming off. And in return, he received approval. Touches. Glances. Words that left him floating. One night late, past midnight. Ethan lay shirtless on the soft carpet of Valerie's study. Nina sat cross-legged near his head, playing with his hair. Valerie stood over him in heels, pressing the tip of one into his chest, not hard, just enough to feel it. There's more, she said softly. Much more we could do. He nodded. But you have to earn it. I want to. Good boy. 2 days later. A message. Friday. Room 3. 9 p.m. Bring nothing but obedience. You're ready. Friday 9 p.m. Carrington House, Room 3. He arrived and waited. The door opened on its own. Inside, candles. Music. Shadows. And them. Valerie in a long black robe, high slit revealing lace underneath. Nina in a dark green corset, barefoot, hair down. They stood close together. Watching him. Take your clothes off, Valerie said. He hesitated. Now, Nina added, stepping forward. He obeyed. They circled him, like a lioness and her panther. Teasing touches, whispered commands. Nina ran her nails down his chest. Valerie placed a leather collar around his neck. It clicked shut. Tonight, Valerie said, you belong to both of us. The next hour blurred the line between mental and physical. They tested his patience, soft strokes, near kisses, but never allowing release. They tested his voice, making him read his own fantasies out loud. They tested his limits, tied, blindfolded, touched but never gratified. At one point, Nina straddled his lap, whispering things in his ear that made him shake. At another, Valerie sat behind him, whispering affirmations as he trembled in restraint. They broke him. And rebuilt him again. End of the session. He knelt on the floor, breathing slow and deep, sweat on his back. Nina pressed a kiss to his temple. Valerie knelt before him. "You're doing well," she said. "But don't confuse this for love." He nodded. "I don't." "Good. Because love is messy. And we prefer control." She smiled, slowly. Then whispered. "But if you earn it, maybe one day, we'll let you see our mess." Sunday morning. Ethan woke up tangled in sheets that weren't his. The scent in the room: leather, jasmine, sweat. His shirt lay on the floor. His skin still held the impressions of restraint. But the most vivid imprint? Her words. "This isn't love. Not yet. Not yet." That word played over in his head like a forbidden melody. He found a note on the nightstand, written in deep red ink. "Rest. Hydrate. Think. You've pleased us." But this was only phase 1. At the bottom, Nina drew a tiny whip next to a smiley face. That week. No messages. No contact. Valerie vanished from faculty meetings. Nina wasn't spotted on campus. Ethan tried to function normally, but he kept replaying everything. The touch of Nina's lips on his neck. The weight of Valerie's eyes in the dark. The sound of the collar clicking into place. He thought about what they gave him: power through surrender, clarity through chaos, and yet he wanted more. But not just obedience. He wanted access. Intimacy. Vulnerability. He wanted them behind the masks. Thursday evening. A knock at his apartment door. He opened it to find Valerie, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater. No heels. No lipstick. Hair down. She looked human. And that terrified him more than anything. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside, speechless. She walked in and took a slow look around. Clean. Minimal. Books, candles, a record player in the corner. "You live like someone trying not to be noticed," she said softly. He closed the door. "Maybe I am." She turned. Her gaze held none of the cold authority of room 3. Just quiet presence. "You're confused." "I'm invested." "Too fast." "No," he said. "Too deep." She walked closer, not seductively, not controlling. Just real. She touched his cheek, thumb grazing the line of his jaw. "You want to know who I am outside the rules?" "Yes." "And what if I'm not what you want?" He didn't flinch. "Then I'll still kneel for the version that gets results. But I'd like to know the woman behind the discipline." A pause. Long waited. Then she whispered, "Sit." He sat on the edge of the couch. She joined him, folding one leg under herself. No teasing. No script. "My husband knows. About you." Ethan's heart skipped. What? He's not involved. But he knows what I am. What Nina and I are. Silence. We haven't been lovers in years. It's a partnership. Practical. He sees other people. I build my own world. She looked him in the eye. That world includes you now. Ethan exhaled slowly. Thank you for telling me. She stood. Pulled something from her bag. A journal. Leather-bound. Heavy. This is yours now. Every thought. Every question. Every fantasy. You write it here. And when you're done, you let me read it? Sunday. Nina texted. Wine glass meet me. 8 p.m. That rooftop bar you keep glancing at on 6th. Wear something that makes you feel dangerous. Ethan laughed out loud. He arrived early. Dark button down, sleeves rolled, black slacks. His heart pounded louder than the music. Nina was already there. Short black dress. Bare shoulders. Martini in hand. You clean up nicely, Professor. He grinned. You knew I'd come. Of course. You're predictable. In the most delicious ways. They sat. Talked. Drank. No games. Just teasing honesty. He learned that Nina had once been engaged to a woman who wanted white fences and quiet sex. I wanted ropes and chaos, she said, sipping her drink. Then I met Valerie. His eyebrows rose. You two were together. She smirked. Are. Were. Will be. It changes. But we never really let go. Then she leaned in, lips close to his ear. She trusts you more than she admits. You're under her skin. Ethan swallowed. And you? She laughed. Oh, I want you broken and begging, baby. But not yet. You're still simmering. They left the bar together, not to her place. Not to his. They walked the long stretch of downtown in silence, fingertips occasionally brushing. At one point, she grabbed his wrist, pushed him into a quiet alley, and kissed him hard. Then she pulled back, breathing fast. That's all for now. Earn the rest. Next message Monday. Phase 2 begins. Carrington House. Room 1. Tuesday. 9 p.m. Come clothed. Leave changed. Tuesday Room 1. He entered to find both women waiting. Valerie stood in a fitted suit. Nina wore a long velvet robe. In the center of the room a mirror. Large. Full length. Surrounded by soft lights. Valerie spoke first. Tonight isn't about touch. It's about confrontation. Nina added, tonight, you'll strip in front of us mentally first, then physically. We'll ask. You'll answer. Fully. Ethan nodded. Valerie gestured to the chair in front of the mirror. Sit. Watch yourself. What followed was the most intimate undoing yet. Questions like: what was the first time you felt unworthy of love? Have you ever faked confidence? Do you think you deserve to be desired without proving yourself first? They didn't mock. They didn't comfort. They just waited for truth. Ethan answered, sometimes through clenched teeth, sometimes whispering, once, crying. And when he finished, Valerie knelt behind him and whispered, "Look at yourself." He did. "That's the man we're building." Then Nina stood behind him, fingers on his shoulders. "Now stand." He stood. "Now undress." Slowly. He obeyed. In front of the mirror, fully exposed, he didn't feel weak. He felt seen. Valerie stepped forward. Touched his chest, over his heart. "Phase 3 will hurt." He nodded. "I'm ready." "You think you are?" She kissed him softly on the lips. Nina kissed the back of his neck. Then they both stepped away. "Next time," Valerie said, "you bleed." Thursday. The final phase. Ethan didn't sleep the night before. Not out of fear, not anymore, but anticipation. He wasn't the same man who nervously entered the staff lounge a month ago. He had been undressed by words, exposed by questions, rebuilt by rules, and kissed by control. And now, everything was converging. Tonight, he would bleed. Not in the literal sense, he knew Valerie well enough by now. What she meant was deeper. Tonight would change everything. 9 p.m. Carrington House, Room 0. He'd never been to this room before. The hallway was darker. The air cooler. No candles. No music. Just a single red bulb above the door. When he entered, it clicked shut behind him, automatic. The room was black. Pitch black. For a full minute, he just stood there, breathing. Then, her voice. "Strip." He did. Slowly. Silently. "Kneel." The floor was cold. His skin broke out in goosebumps. "You asked to bleed, Ethan," Valerie said softly from the dark. "Do you remember what that means?" He nodded, then realized she couldn't see him. "I do." "Say it." He licked his lips. "To surrender something that won't grow back the same." "Correct." A spotlight turned on. Dim, warm. It illuminated only him. Everything else remained shadowed. Then he heard her footsteps, high heels clicking. Slow. Precise. She emerged, dressed in a long red coat, buttoned to the throat. Her face was calm. Her eyes stormy. Then came Nina, barefoot, no robe, only black lace and leather straps. Wild. Smiling. They circled him like twin moons orbiting a drowning sun. The ritual began. Not sex. Confession. Each woman asked him to give up a part of himself. Valerie demanded he speak the lie he'd carried since childhood. Nina forced him to confront the fantasy he'd always been too ashamed to admit. He whispered, "I want to be used. Worshipped. Owned. But I also want to be loved." A long silence. Valerie knelt beside him, finally unbuttoning the coat. Underneath, nothing but skin. She was beautiful in a way that was earned, not performed. Lines, curves, scars. History. "Then bleed for it," she whispered. She pulled a thin strip of red silk and tied it gently around his eyes. Then came the discipline. Not punishment-proof. They took turns commanding, teasing, pushing. He was restrained not tightly, but enough to test trust. Nina's lips danced over his ribs, his thighs. Her nails left traces hot, sweet pain. Valerie spoke commands like scripture. And when he begged, truly begged, they let him feel release. Not just climax, but freedom. Tears came before anything else. And when it was over, they wrapped him in soft blankets, laid him between them, and said nothing. Just silence, and soft hands in his hair. He was shaking. But not from fear. From peace. An hour later. The room was quiet. The lights low. Ethan sat with his head resting against Valerie's bare shoulder. Nina traced circles on his chest with a finger. "Why me?" he asked softly. Valerie answered first. "Because you cracked open instead of hardening," Nina added. "And because watching you become ours was the best show in town." He chuckled weakly. "What now?" he whispered. Valerie leaned in, lips near his ear. "Now we decide together." 2 weeks later. Ethan's life looked the same from the outside. He still taught classes. Still drank cheap coffee. Still graded freshman essays filled with bad metaphors. But everything inside him had shifted. He journaled daily. He met with Valerie and Nina for structured sessions, sometimes mental, sometimes physical, sometimes both. He learned safe words, studied emotional thresholds, practiced patience. And one Sunday, Valerie handed him a key. "To room 0, she said. "You've earned the right to come on your own terms." That night, he didn't use the key. He simply held it. Felt the weight of what it meant. Then whispered, "Thank you." Epilogue. It never became a relationship in the traditional sense. There were no anniversaries, no meet the parents, no Facebook status updates. But what they had was deeper. A dynamic. A choice. A space where Ethan could surrender, rebuild, and rise stronger. He wasn't owned. He belonged. And that, he realized, was what he'd been searching for all along. The end.